Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. There's a lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And I do apologize about the sound. Okay, we're on now. First off, we are less than 2,000 subscribers short of the 100,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. Let's get over that line. In the last few days, several thousand people have registered on our new platform, lovinglifetv.com. Have you? If you haven't, you're missing out on our daily emails with lots of updates linked directly to new articles and videos dealing with South Africa. And I do apologize for the little sound glitch there, but this is live. Thanks, Gerard. He says, Scott, you sound like hippo lips are moving, but no sound. Well, the sound, I believe, is back now. Good. Okay, let's get back to the subject of tonight's live stream. And South Africa is burning, and the insurrection has been planned from high levels within politics and state organs. It is clearly aimed at toppling Ramaphosa's government. If this happens, who will fill the gap? That is the million-dollar question. Will it be Julius Malema, the Zuma family, or will the adults in the room take the country back to sanity under martial law? What are the implications of the United Nations becoming involved? all questions we'll be talking about tonight. Let's have a look at what is taking place in South Africa. We'll just look briefly at the looting aspect, just so you get an idea.
Slow. Slow.
This is the inside of a shop that's being looted, and these are looters being chased out.
Break in the link. Break in the link. Sia. No shopping. Hey, toi. No shopping. Break in the next. Matogori, give us a next.
This is shocking South African
give us a next. Matogori, give us a next. Lata. No shopping
for free.
No shopping
Everything for free.
No shopping. Hey, no shopping. Hey, shopping. Come on. What is this? Inane, buya come on. I was like a uto happy. Sia. Hey, siamo. Zoma. Hey, le mkhono mkhulu wa to uto. O tla go bala nkhono. Saman slow tale mara, tsang slow.
Ophila ukuvuleni lika manje ke sokutha manibuyele ekhaya
kumele sibuyele emakhaya siyohlala inyanga sazi ukuthi into yanini ngoba ishop iphelile
bengicela omunye osebenza la
Nangaphi?
ukuphi nawe futhi usebenza la ePick and Pay usuboneni wena futhi uzizwa kanjani ngalokho
Ayi ngizwa hayi kubheda kakhulu sis, hayi kubheda kakhulu imisebenzi yethu iyaphela sineyingane yonke lento hayi lento esiyibona lana isiphathi kahle ayisiphathi kahle impela sis sekumele sibuyele endlini manje asazi nosobizwa nini kanjani hayi yabheda impela sis isiphatha kahle.
So people lost jobs. Yes, hello again. This is Fiso Twala Media. Yes, this is a rich man in Pietermaritzburg. As you can see, he's driving a very expensive AMG car, and as well.
Okay, I think you get the idea. Looting is rife in South Africa, and sadly, the implications for the country are not good. Now, in a clear example of the idiotic thinking of the ANC leadership, I came across this report. State Security Minister Ayanda Dlodlo said intelligence agencies are already looking into possible attacks on foreign nationals and right-wing extremism in the wake of the violence that has gripped KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Right-wing extremism? Really? Now, please remember to register on lovinglifetv.com and Loving Life on YouTube to be kept informed. I will get our guest Yusuf Ismail on. Here we go. Hi, Yusuf.
Hello. Hi there, how are you?
Excellent, thank you. Excellent.
Good to see you, Scott.
And good to see you, Yusuf. I just want
Can you
to...
hear me?
I can, and I just want to say hi to our close to 500 viewers at the moment on the 2 channels that we're streaming from. And guys, please remember to subscribe on Loving Life on YouTube, and please remember to register on lovinglifetv.com, the platform we are transitioning to. We are getting out of YouTube and censorship city in the future because we have had enough. Okay, we're gatval with YouTube. Anyway, let's get back to the subject at hand. Now, Yusuf, I don't think I've seen a more extraordinary 7 days in my life in South Africa. And I'm a 66-year-old man. Please tell us, what are your views on what is happening right now in South Africa?
You know, it is absolutely shocking. You 66, I've got some time to get till I'm 66, but with the way things are going in this country, we don't know, in fact, if a lot of us will, in fact, reach that particular place. You're quite right. It's, you know, it's extraordinary. South Africa is a nation which has, over the years, surprised us, and certainly we've attained a new degree of normality in accepting on a day-to-day basis, a daily basis, in fact, every week, every day, corruption, the level of corruption, to the extent that regardless of how brazen and how outrageous the corruption is, we've got used to that. But what we've seen over the past 7 days is something I don't think many of us, at least who are living presently and contemporaneous, have experienced something of this caliber and this level in South Africa. I mean, we've seen shocking images that a lot of us have never experienced in our lifetimes, and I'm not talking about people my age or younger than me. I'm talking about, you know, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, even during the heights of the oppressive apartheid, people never saw something along this particular line, where for the first time you have a situation where infrastructure, businesses, roads, points of access, you know, places where people go day to day in their work environment are not just simply being looted. This is not just simply running in, breaking into a store and looting, but you're talking about total and utter cleaning up, and not just simply cleaning up, total destruction. Once these looters, in fact, once these acts of criminality, in fact, take place, the level of criminality, in fact, occurs. These individuals are then destroying infrastructure. They're destroying businesses to the extent that, you know, it's one thing losing your items, one thing losing your particular business equipment and household equipment. That's one thing, but totally destroying it to the point of annihilation. And we're not just talking about businesses. We're talking about surgeries. We're talking about individuals who are going out and giving food to the people, mosques. We've got warehouses. The Gift of the Givers organization, by the way, in the Port Shepstone area in Marburg, they hired they had a renting a warehouse where some of the items and stocks were kept. They destroyed it. I was there yesterday. I was shocked at the level of insanity that we've seen over the past 7 days, and I'm actually a bit lost for words.
Yeah, look, it is absolutely crazy, and you touched on something I'd like you to expand on, and that is the importance of the supply lines, because South Africa is a big country, and because the rail network doesn't work properly, they're dependent on trucks and roads. Now, what's happened over the last week is dozens of trucks have been burnt and looted. And I know, for example, that the main petrol refining plant in South Africa has shut down because they said they're not going to be operating while there's civil unrest. Now, that puts in jeopardy the supply of fuel. That there are a whole lot of ramifications here that clearly are going to have a huge impact on South Africans in the next week or two. Do you want to talk about the importance of the supply lines?
Well, you know, absolutely. In fact, I just saw the report by SAPREF yesterday. I'm trying to get it on my mobile phone, which in fact gave the indication. In fact, let me just try and see. There was a letter sent out by SAPREF. I think I had Marlena sent it to you. I'm not so sure if she did send it to you, but what they're basically stating is that they are now. Here's a chain. In fact, it's a notice. It's a notice by the refinery, and I'm going to come to the issue of the supply chain. Yeah. There was a notice of force majeure, which is a Latin term, and what SAPREF is basically saying that as a result of the unrest, the suppliers of critical SAPRAF operations communicated the suspension of all deliveries. And of course, without any degree of clarity in terms of how long the unrest and when will normal work will resume, SAPRAF now is unable to sustain any kind of refinery operations, and consequently, they've made the difficult decision, according to them, of shutting down the entire refinery. And so as a result of that, SAPRAF is basically declaring that the occurrence of any event, like a kind of a vis major or a force majeure, excuse SAPRAF from, in fact, performing under that particular agreement. And that means if the refineries are basically destroyed, essentially, we are essentially doomed. I'll give you one example. Right now on the South Coast, and I'm not talking, there's different aspects in the South Coast, but I'm on the extreme portion of the South Coast. I'm not going to disclose where exactly I stay. But all the engine garages, all the total garages, the Shell garages, the BP garages, they've got no fuel. They've got very little fuel. And of course, the limited amount of fuel that are being supplied are essentially to your essential workers. I could technically qualify as an essential worker operating within the courts and the justice center, but they're limiting you to at least about 200 to 250 rands. Now, that limitation is now, but as the days go by, there's not going to be enough fuel for even essential workers, for your policemen, for security guards, for the security companies, for those individuals that have basically formed protection barriers supporting communities. We had a situation where somebody was waiting outside the Total garage today for diesel for a period of 4 hours. After 4 hours, there was no diesel available. So this is and the problem is that the difficulty with this is that besides the refinery shutting down and besides the fuel tanks now not going on the road, this extends not just to your gasoline, your oil, your petrol. This extends also to your food supply. I mean, in our shops, and I believe the same thing is in the greater Durban area, and indeed much of KwaZulu-Natal. I mean, some of these towns have been totally gutted. I don't know if Marlene has sent you the pictures of the town that you and I are both familiar with, Ikopo. The town, a little town like that in the middle of nowhere, is surrounded by just simply forests and countryside that was totally ruined, totally gutted. And these are black businesses also, and Indian businesses, totally ruined. There's no big chain stores, and if you want to target so-called white monopoly capital, these are small in towns. Tomorrow, we're going to have bread. There's no bread. There's no milk in any of the shops. I had to go in powder from Spa after having waited a period of 2.5 hours in a queue. I mean, the queues are extraordinarily long, and when you enter the shop itself, the Spa shop or whatever small restaurants or supply stores are available, there's no items. I mean, your bread is not there. There's baking flour that's not there. Your basic carbohydrates is not there. Baby food is not there. And I don't understand the logic and the rationale behind this. And we're going to probably explore that or the decision taken by an existing government against your hero. You end up destroying your own house, your own infrastructure, your own businesses in the process to just simply loot supplies which will last you for 5 days and then it's gone. This doesn't make sense. It makes absolutely no sense. Besides that, people are now living in fear. When I went to the this morning, there's an egg which supplies. There's no eggs. There's no eggs or stores. They're going to shut down the means of, because you're going to have a situation that they are in an area where will probably be under attack.
Right.
You have a situation where you can let your guard down and then be attacked. That's much of South Africans, particularly KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, and possibly and yet spread to the Western Cape, are living in a state of siege. We are living in a siege, and a lot of us, including yourself, have predicted that something of this particular nature, this eventuality, would eventually hit South Africa. And now we're basically faced in it. So I having this chat and having this conversation with you, but I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know how long, if this goes on, whether eventually, let's look at a week, let's look at 2 weeks. Are we going to have enough food? Once the supply have been totally destroyed, what are the stores going to buy us? What are we going to have? I mean, and this was so sudden, unlike level 5 lockdown where, there was an immediate rush for people to buy, but there were no inordinately long queues and you could access them at any given time.
Right. Now, Yusuf, can I just
Yusuf, we totally
Yusuf, can I cut in for a
Go
second?
ahead, Scott.
Our internet connection is not
Sure.
great. Your voice is breaking up a bit. So we'll keep on for a few minutes. And if it continues, what I'll do is I'll ask you to turn your camera off, because that'll reduce the load and we can concentrate on the audio. Now, there are a couple of points I'd like to raise that relate to what you were just talking about. And the first one is the importance that people should have prepped. Now, we've been saying to people for years, literally, that you've got to learn how to prep and prepare for this sort of situation, which has now occurred. And the other thing that I found astounding was a video of 2 police stopping people shopping inside a spa because they said that there was no social distancing, and they refused to let people to go and shop inside the spa. Now, when you consider what's going on around South Africa and the number of police who are being caught looting, the whole country is in a complete state of disarray and anarchy. What are your thoughts about the lack of response by the police to what is going on?
Scott, what amazes me in the past 2 days, we saw this kind of bravado element from the police and even this muscularity from the military last year in April 2020, where there was this kind of abuse taking place on ordinary civilians. I have never in my life seen the level of cowardice and fear in the eyes of the police as I have over this past 2 days. I'll give you one personal example. On the South Coast, I'm not going to mention his name, but a friend of mine had his warehouse. He's a hardware supplier, friend of family friend. He had his warehouse totally gutted. They looted, and we were concerned about his safety, his well-being. He was not answering his call, and so we went. It's in the Marburg area. When we went to the Marburg area, normally you'd have a situation, just in a normal day-to-day environment, you'd have traffic police officers. They'd stop you. They'd ask you for your license. They'd bully you, or you'd have roadblocks set up. There were police on the scene. They never stopped us from passing by. During the looting that was taking place there, and there were gunshots that were basically heard, we got out and we went onto the premises itself. I went onto the premises, and the police were doing nothing. Eventually, we met up with the owner, and then we left the scene. But the point being made is that I can now, at this particular juncture, travel from point A to point B with the police not telling me anything. What I will confront and what I may come across would be debris, rocks, destruction, and possibly mobs, depending on where I travel and where I go to, that would probably come in my way. And then, of course, you've got now communities that have basically created militias. Not surprisingly, they have created militias. You've got old ex-army officers, you've got individuals within security companies, you've got just community people who want to defend their businesses. They are setting barriers, and they are basically, in fact, creating some degree of protection and the security net that is happening. But in a general sense, you've got absolutely no police presence, or very little that I have seen, particularly in the area that I've been and come across. Yesterday, at the looting and cleaning out of the largest, one of the largest warehouses in KZN, the game warehouse, I think in the images that I
saw
think,
that
I don't know
from
if you
the
played that
air,
on your... Yeah, I don't know if you played that, but if you do in fact play that, there are droves and droves of thousands of people, thousands coming in cars in X5s,
The N2 was
Mercedes-Benzes,
closed.
and just ordinary folk. And the N2 was closed, but these people are coming in droves. Not a single police sight, and not only that, Scott, they are taking forklifts. They are driving out of the game warehouses and the macro warehouses and the major stores with forklifts. These are not just your average looters picking up one or two things and running. They are literally taking forklifts and driving out with forklifts. The police are standing by and doing nothing. They're doing absolutely nothing in this environment. They claim now that there's about 1,234 arrests. And I saw the speech by the mayor in Durban, Polisi Kaunda, who, in fact, you know, that image of that policeman and there were that police vehicle that were involved in the looting, he defended them, Metro Police. He defended those individuals by saying that they had gone and secured stolen property. Doesn't make sense. Whilst looting is happening around them, somehow or the other, these policemen are taking and securing stolen property into their Metro Police vehicle and driving off whilst looters are in fact engaging in the data. So there's a clear disingenuity from these liars posing as politicians and so-called leaders that we have in terms of the reality of what's going down on the ground. And one thing you've learned from this, and I hope many people out there learn, is that the authority and your government cannot be trusted. Let the world know now that the ANC-led government is a failure, that they have led South Africa to become a totally dismal failed state, and that your leadership is your enemy. Your leadership is indeed your enemy in the given circumstances.
Right. Now, look, I've got a couple of points I want to just raise with respect to what you just said. The first thing I want to mention is that the opportunism that is, it's incredible by these black communities. Because as I said in a video earlier, I don't think I have seen one person from a minority group involved in what's going on right now in South Africa. In all the videos, I've watched hundreds of videos of looting, burning, trucks being destroyed. It is absolutely, it's gut-wrenching what you see. And then you got Ramaphosa getting up on the stage to address the nation. And, you know, you can see this man is so weak. He is so weak. Don't you think what's behind this is a coup being led by the Zuma faction? And of course, they've still got a lot of contacts in high places in bureaucracy. And I think this is the other thing I'd say is, don't you think this is planned? The whole operation of looting and burning has been planned, because if you take the game warehouse as an example, all those thousands of people somehow knowing to just go there at the same time, there's something going on behind the scenes that's planning this whole thing. What are your views on that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that the entire process was systematically orchestrated. I mean, I was laughing at a tweet by the ANN journalist, you know, the Gupta TV journalist, and I think the what was it called, the New Age journalist, Kim Kune Heller. I don't know if you ever heard of her, but where she tried to defend this by saying that this is as a result of the, you know, it's poverty that is leading to this, which is absolute, you know, a load of rubbish. Certainly, there is a lot of poverty in this country, but it's not poverty that is driving this at this juncture. Because if it was poverty that was driving this, then this would have happened a long, long time ago. I mean, the situation over the past, the situation now is certainly in a worse situation. But in terms of the poverty, there has been a lot of poverty and disenfranchisement for the past 2 decades. That hasn't led to this particularly. Reports that are coming on clearly show that there is some degree of systematic orchestration that is taking place at the higher level. You know, when Cyril Ramaphosa, and you may have, I think, played it, in fact, made the address to the nation, I think it was, you know, now I'm even forgetting the days, but I think it was Monday night, the day after the Sunday COVID address, there was an expectation, knowing full well that at that stage there was going to be a declaration of a state of emergency in at least KZN and Gauteng. And under the state of emergency, only essential workers, those carrying permits, would obviously be permitted to travel and so on. And despite that expectation, the president, as usual, as we've always described him, what I think you call him rhino eyes, was hippo eyes, ended up being a lame hippo eyes. He was a lame duck. I mean, this man is a lame duck. He's a person that seems to be totally controlled, either by himself or he's in a state of fear. He said essentially nothing. He said nothing of substance. There has been a slight deployment of the military, I think last night on Tuesday, late last night, which was after all the destruction had taken place, of a few thousand military officers, and they put them in areas which were already gutted and destroyed. So clearly, the man is a man of straw. He's someone that I would call a Teflon president, someone that does not have any degree of gut within himself
he's got no balls.
speak.
He's got no balls.
Well, you can put it as that, as crudely as that. But what is also disturbing now is that State Security Agency has now confirmed receiving tip-offs that former senior members were are in fact behind and have orchestrated the violent unrest. I've sent you those reports, and I think you may have seen those reports. Is that they knew well in advance, and this is how intelligence always works, is that they knew, they can confirm that days before this, they received intelligence that some of the former senior members within the ANC who were aggressive supporters of the former President Zuma were key in beginning to commence and orchestrate the violent unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. And I think one of the individuals that comes to mind that was in fact exposed by the city press and I think News 24 was a character called Tulani Dlomo. I mean, this chap Tulani Dlomo was someone that had started working within the State Security Agency during the Zuma regime prior to his actual formal appointment. And so what you've got here, in a sense, and then of course there's this maverick, this insane character, the one who's a former DJ. Just a week ago, I called him a hooligan, and I was taken to task by someone on social media, threatening to take the necessary steps against me. He was in fact calling for bloodshed. He's appealing to the historical battles between the English and the Zulu from the 18th century, and invoking war talk. And so clearly, you've got individuals that are there at the outset that are inciting this at a public level, and then certainly behind the scenes. What we clearly can see from this, Scott, is what you see playing out on the streets before us is ANC factionalism being battled on the streets. You've got two camps. You've got the Ramaphosa camp on the one side, which is now seen and has been shown to be utterly weak and totally gutless and of no strength. I mean, the police have been shown to be a bunch of weaklings. Certainly, there are a lot of strong, competent policemen, but the vast majority that I've come across, and certainly that we've encountered over the past few days, are either absent, are in hiding, or simply cannot do anything along the particular line. There was a video I sent to Marlene about a Muslim religious leader, together with other members of the community, running the show and telling the police how to operate and what to do. Where and in which country and in which lifetime do you see such insanity taking place? So at the public level, there are people who are instigating this. There's Duduzane Zuma, the son, his daughter, Duduzile Zuma, sending out these offensive tweets, inciting violence, calling for redress, reset, redistribution, and all of that, trying to, and then of course telling people to, he's got the audacity to telling people to in fact loot responsibly, be responsible in your actions of criminality. You've never heard of this. And then behind the scenes, I believe, there are far more sinister characters, and particularly those who fund Zuma and his particular faction, together with leading individuals like Ace Magashule and other characters, Carl Niehaus, for example, and individuals who clearly are aware of the fact and orchestrating the scene. I just want to share with you before I move over to you that the Jacob Zuma Foundation, I just came across this tweet in preparation for this particular interview. They made a tweet this evening, I believe. I'm just trying to see if I can obtain the tweet, and they essentially said that where are we here? In the face of mobilization, the general, what they essentially said, and I can't seem to get it now, but what they basically said is unless the release of Umsholozi does not happen immediately, one will clearly see a continuation and calling to continue the so-called struggle for and on behalf of Zuma, which would obviously translate into the violent looting that we are seeing taking place in both KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, and parts of the Eastern Cape. But what is more disturbing also is that Bheki Cele, and Bheki Cele is someone that himself has backgrounds in a briefing to give an update on the together with the defense minister, stated that they were looking at about 10 to 12 people high.
Sorry, Yusuf,
not just on social media.
Yusuf,
Yes.
you're breaking up at the moment. So
I'm here, Scott.
Yeah, you're breaking up at the moment. So we've hit a flat spot with the internet. So I'll just make a couple of comments, then come back to you. Firstly, I just want to address, we've got about getting close to 1,000 people watching across the two platforms. That's lovinglifetv.com and Loving Life on YouTube. Please remember to register on lovinglifetv.com. That's the platform we are moving to in the future. And please, if you haven't done so, please subscribe to Loving Life on YouTube. We want to get to that 100,000 mark. We're just about 1,000 subscribers short, so we're looking forward to hitting that figure. Now, okay, getting back to you, Yusuf. Let's hope your internet is picked up again. You mentioned.
Sure. Do you want me to put up? Should I put off my camera?
Oh no, it's just transitional. It's come back again now. Look, with what you mentioned, Duduzile Zuma and Zuma's daughter, and the comments they're making that are, they're inciting people to riot, and this is the other thing that really pisses me off, is that the mainstream media in South Africa still call these protests. These aren't protests. These are riots. This is anarchy. When are they going to get their language right? What do you think about the role of the mainstream media here in South Africa?
Look, I've been following the, right now I think mainstream media has become kind of irrelevant in the sense that a lot of people are in fact getting, minute by minute and second by second updates, not on the mainstream media, on television, but by social media. I mean, the as much as I'm not too much in favor of social media and WhatsApp video sharing and all of that, people are now seeing firsthand something that we would never have seen 10 or 15 years ago, where now you have eyewitness accounts by everyday people who can become a journalist or a reporter of the actual incident, and we are basically updated by the moment. Now, of course, in having said that, there's a lot of negativity and there's a lot of back and forth and sometimes fake news that can be circulated as well. But the mainstream media, in fact, from what I can see, has acquired a position of irrelevance in terms of giving a fair and accurate account in terms of what is transpiring, because that kind of information is being given channel free people every day, like you and me, for example. You've got your alternative channel, and I'm talking about even people that have no access to the massive audience that these individuals are able to just sense of what is happening and simply share them within their groups, and they become viral. So we are now getting a situation where mainstream media has reached a position of, it's still there, it's still available, but for analysis and all the rest. But we have other sources and other sources of information in terms of where we can get our material to view and so on.
Now,
But
can I just
having
pick up
said
on a
that, and I
point
just want
there,
to bring
Yusuf?
this up.
Yusuf, can I just pick up on a point there? Don't you think perhaps that
Go ahead.
if you take the alternative social media, generally they have no access to these ministers in the ANC. They have no access to the top bureaucrats or politicians. I know with Loving Life, we've only spoken to a couple of top politicians, including the leader of the EFF Plus, Dr. Peter Groenewald. But apart from that, we speak to the man on the street. Now, what you find with the mainstream media is they talk to the Ramaphosas, they talk to the Bekeseles, they talk to all these people, and they're completely missing the reality of the situation, because these guys like Ramaphosa, they live in cloud cuckoo land. I mean, they might as well be on Mars as far as what's going on in South Africa is concerned. And I think Ramaphosa's speech the other night just reflected that. He had no understanding of the chaos that was going on in his country. Please, what are your thoughts on that?
No, none whatsoever. I mean, you see, that's the thing. Even the defense minister, for example, up until Monday, until there was an inordinate amount of pressure on her, denied that there was even a crisis. She went on to say that there's no need, the cynicism of this whole thing, Scott, and the insanity of it. Last year, you remember last year I was talking to you, they deployed, or at least they claim to have deployed, 76,000 military to deal with ensuring that people go ahead and follow the COVID regulations, wear a mask, don't come out of your houses. People who are not a threat to them. Now, when you need a strong force, when you need possibly the military to ensure some degree of prevention of these mobs looting and taking over towns and burning entire towns and cities up, when you need them, she said there's no need for this, because we are the only need for the military is when there is a war. I mean, what are we in? You see, the point being made is this, stupidity like this, of this nature that you see, actually deserves a standing ovation. But the reality is that sadly, South Africa is on its knees. And Ramaphosa was not aware, nor was his stupid, ridiculous defense minister aware, that entire communities, go to a holding area, have been totally razed. But more significant, at least for those who are trying to calculate what the future might hold, the violence has targeted the vital distribution. I mean, they were not aware. The mayor of Durban was not aware. The logistics capacity in Mooi River, local food and dry goods stores throughout eThekwini, large malls and warehouse facilities throughout the coastline of Pietermaritzburg, KZN, and the state insurance agencies certainly also on the hook for these costs. But ultimately, it means that taxpayers serve as guarantors, and the damage that arises from this is likely to be about tens of billions of rands. Yes. I saw on Monday morning, the cost was 2 billion rands. Now it's possibly nearly impossible to rebuild what has been burned down. All this could have been stopped. I mean, on Sunday night, when Ramaphosa was addressing the nation on COVID-19, the whole of South Africa was up in arms about what was happening. The burnings and the lootings were taking place. He said nothing. He said literally nothing on that issue. He had to wait another 48 hours before he addresses the nation on Monday night, after much of the towns and infrastructure and communities are burned down, to try and say we're urging restraint from members of the community. And we are taking steps to ensure what we're going to do. I mean, this is a man that's a failure. He's been a failure as a president, total failure. I mean, this is, the issue, Scott, is this, is that if you own the supply chain of food and infrastructure, you own the country. And that is a basic tenet of warfare. And, we need to make no mistake that there is essentially a plan. And the trouble in KN is much more than a political protest or a spontaneous statement of local anguish by poor people. Under the cover, under the charade of this human parasite, Jacob Zuma's jailing, there is a large sophisticated network that is basically flexing its muscles. And Richard Poplar from the Daily Maverick made the point where he quoted them in a manner of speaking by saying that these people are telling us, we are here, stop us if you can. And what was the state's reply? What was Ramaphosa's reply? It was anemic. It was strained. He says, we can't. Help yourself. I mean, and besides Ramaphosa, where were all your political opposition leaders? Where were they? I mean, I can't recall, unless you can correct me. I never saw John Steenhuisen, or the major political opposition leaders, in fact, coming out strongly on what is happening in here. I mean, Julius Malema, opportunistically enough, came up, and he's an opportunist. He's a dangerous opportunist, fascist party. He came up, but all he said was that, as a threat to Ramaphosa, that if you deploy the military, then take note, we will enter the night. I mean, the thing is that the reality is that you've got a kind of, Zuma's opponents, and that basically is apparently everyone on earth. They like to remind us again and again that that he has no real power. His support has faded away from political prominence, that his kids are lunatics, and not the social media influencers. But what his arrest has shown, they've dragged up, as many analysts have pointed out, his arrest has essentially dragged up something which is dark and vicious from the underworld. A kind of bogeyman, the monster. And essentially South Africa's elites are relatively horrified by any talk of tribalism. I'll give you one other classic example. Your Minister of Police, Bheki Cele, is in close friendship with the Taba brothers. These are individuals that run the taxi operation in KZN, and they were in fact involved in acts of criminality back, and they're a gangster family, and a lot of suggestion has been made that these individuals have spearheaded a lot of the stopping of the taxis, and ensuring the taxi support, the entire convoy of taxis that we escort to jail support for Zuma. That's run by the Taba brothers. These are a powerful family in KZN that has contracts with the municipality. Bheki Cele is in close alliance with them. He's in close communication with them. And the head of the Taba family is the nephew of Jacob Zuma. So this basically tells you how deep and how sinister the level of criminality basically runs. That there is a spider's web that essentially takes place and is controlling the various individuals. And, the reality is that for all of us, for the day-to-day man, it's no longer safe to truck goods in KZN. As of today, right now, all roads into KZN are controlled by the mob. It's no longer safe to run a ShopRite or Checkers or Woolworths. Even in Johannesburg or the town of Durban, the warnings represent the birth pangs of this probably a kind of a Russian-style mafia shadow economy, which threatens to become the real economy. And that's a vision which Jacob Zuma and his cabal in the State Security Agency hope to initiate under his presidency. I mean, all this happened. Zuma knows full well what is happening. He knows full well what is happening. Right. And what has happened is that of late, just to finish on this point, Julius Malema and the economic freedom fighters have now formed an alliance with the Zuma Brigade. The schizophrenic nature of these political powers, that whilst he was in power, we would see him attacking Zuma in parliament. Now he's formed this dangerous alliance with Zuma, and they're attempting in some degree or the other to possibly stage a coup and topple Ramaphosa, who is supported by another group of bandits, by the way.
Yeah. Now, look, I just want to address a couple of things that you've brought up. And first of all, you talked about I call it the L factor, the logic factor, when you talked about the Minister of Defense. It's completely missing in action when it comes to the ANC. And I will never forget that statement by the Minister of Defense a couple of years ago, who said that we keep on losing tanks because they're camouflaged. We might have to start painting them red and blue so we don't lose them. I mean, what the heck is that all about? This is the caliber of the people who are supposed to be running the Defense Force. No wonder it's a complete joke. Now, the other thing that I need to mention here, which comes to your point of the potential coup, is the incredible situation where you've got the police hitting the soft targets, where someone's walking on the beach and they shouldn't be, and they go and arrest him and put him behind bars. And here you've got this dangerous despot, Julius Malema, getting up there, talking to his supporters, no social distancing, no masks, no police, doing what they like, and he's provoking them into causing mayhem in South Africa. And clearly, as you mentioned, he is part of this coup. Duduzile Zuma, Jacob Zuma's son, just released a video yesterday where he says there is going to be a great reset. Now, he's picked up on this great reset thing, and he said, we will be in charge by 2024. Once we have trashed South Africa, we will then be able to rebuild it as a new transformed society. I mean, what the heck is all that about? And why aren't these people being put behind bars? You know, Malema, Duduzile Zuma, Zuma's daughter. These people don't deserve to be getting a public platform. And talking about public platforms, where is Jacob Zuma? He should be coming out and telling people to stop rioting. But no, he's not, because clearly he's relishing what's going on. What are your thoughts about the role of Julius Malema and the Zuma family in this coup?
Well, this is what I pointed out earlier, is that the arrest of Jacob Zuma happened on Wednesday, last week Wednesday, and I think maybe we need to also go and unpack a bit of the context behind that arrest, because a lot of people don't know why he's been arrested, but we'll probably deal and cross that bridge. But immediately after the arrest, there was then immediate excitement. You had this character, Carl Niehaus.
Yes.
I'll probably give you his number. Your viewers can probably know him. But after incitement, immediately after the arrest, there was this degree of incitement from this hype squad. One of it was obviously Duduzile Zuma. Edward Zuma, I think, made the point that, clearly there's going to be bloodshed. And back then, we were of the view that that bloodshed he was talking about, or, the arrest, it was simply going to be limited to the Nkandla area, that if should the police turn up, there's going to be battles or war going to be fought against the police, or battles against the police, and kind of fight back. But we all thought that this was what he was referring to. Duduzile Zuma, his daughter, said the same. And then there was this insane radio DJ. He's a radio DJ, by the way, in Gizwe, Mtunu. His name, I've got his name now, in Gizwe, Mtunu. He was dressed in traditional Zulu attire, and he was invoking war talk, talking about, I forget the year, 1876, the year when he was talking about some battle between the English and the Zulus, and particularly when King Sethwayo, in fact, kidnapped or taken away by the English. But he was inciting war talk, and all of us thought back then that this, in fact, referred to the fact that you come and touch Zuma, and we're going to basically deal with you. We're going to basically attack you, fight you. You're going to end up killing us before you can get to Jacob Zuma. But looking at that now in hindsight, and the fact that he then voluntarily handed himself over, and he chose particularly the escort correctional services within which to essentially spend out the time in custody. Looking at it in hindsight, it is quite clear that this incitement and this war talk and this bravado that they were talking about had nothing to do about standing up and forming a line of defense to prevent people or the police or the armed forces from coming and arresting them. It had nothing to do with that. It had absolutely everything to do with what we are seeing now happening, where as a result of this purported literally handing over of himself, said, look, I'm going to be the good man. I'm going to hand myself in to the correctional supervision officers and be the good bloke here, knowing full well that this would in fact trigger, and deliberately so, incite, as I've said, by the same characters, massive uproar, leading eventually to the kind of insanity that we see here on a day-to-day basis, every particular hour. And what Malema basically did, and certainly as I call him an opportunist, his response and his involvement came when the talk of the military being deployed came out, and then he made that no soldiers in our streets, otherwise we are joining, and all fighters must be ready, referring to his group of supporters. They won't kill us all. He's got a knack of avoiding personal involvements. He's a coward. He won't get personally involved in these fights. He won't be able to fight himself, but he'll basically send people out there to fight. But having said all of that, and since you've raised the issue of the police, and you've raised the point that from this kind of vantage point, in the middle of bouts of mega violence, which are caught on camera by us as ordinary citizens, what's the role of the police in all of this? What on earth is the role of the police? And for the first time we're seeing, Scott, we are seeing for the first time how ineffective and how hopeless the police are. I mean, already there's been a mistrust of the police. Already there's been a mistrust. Last year, we saw some degree of muscularity, but that level of muscularity from the police and the military was only expended on the weak, on people basically
Soft
minding their
targets.
businesses, people who are not wearing masks, children who are going with their families to the beachfront and all of that. They were soft targets. They were easy to deal with. But now, when it comes to the police on the streets, generally, the argument and the criticism that they're not one underpaid, which is true. I can testify to that. I know a lot of policemen, personal friends. And number two, they're untrained. If you look at the average policeman, I mean, I could probably beat most of them, 60% of them at the very least, in terms of ordinary worker. They're not trained. 3, they've never had the trust of the people. And 4, they became the face of the lockdowns. So because of this, for the third time in 2 years, we now have a situation that the army is now being brought to roam into poor South African communities, in the poor communities of South Africa. And in the process, the police are doing nothing. They're sitting back. They can do nothing. They have now, when I interacted with the police officers so far over the past few days, I was emboldened to in fact tell them and show up their cowardice by walking onto a scene in the middle of a looting that was taking place. In a normal situation, in any crime scene, the police would take a hard approach against you if you come onto a crime scene. For the first time in my life, I drove through a roadblock without being stopped by the police. They never asked me a question. I came onto a scene where looting was happening. And then I went and saw the owner and eventually left the scene after there were some elements and bouts of violence that were taking place. That never happens in a normal society.
Yeah.
The police have basically lost total credibility over the past few days. People don't respect them. I'm telling you now, I'm having communications with people at the grassroots levels. They do not fear them. They do not respect them. And that's why these mobs have got the courage that they have got the courage. These criminal mobs know that they can do what they do because the police will do nothing. Who's doing something to protect the community? It's armed militia groups that are being formed. People are now resorting to protect their own property. They've been abandoned by the cops. They've been abandoned by a lot of security companies. And now they're firing live arms against each other. And not surprisingly, sooner or later, this can be triggered into a racial war. I mean, all of them, and they know this. The political leaders, Ramaphosa, knows this. When you're firing live rounds at black people and they fire rounds against you, then you've got pictures of Indians killing black people. I mean, you must have seen some of these gruesome pictures. What does this lead to? It leads to a climate of racial tension.
Yeah.
And it's not particularly sustainable to gender any degree of racial harmony. And they've allowed this to happen. This is what failure looks like. Its roots are intertwined with centuries and decades of corruption mixed with austerity. That's
Yeah.
basically what's happening here. And at the end of the day, our souls are going to be caught up in this mess that we basically created. And Cyril Ramaphosa, the politicians, the political leaders, the government, they will do nothing. They will do nothing to assist us. Your government has failed you. Don't turn to your government for support. Don't even vote them in this nation. And at grassroots levels, if you can protect yourself as a community, then you're sure that you can govern yourself without the need for the ANC-led government out there.
Right. Well, look, I need to just pick up on something you said there, Yusuf, and you were talking about this DJ who was in tribal outfit and said some things about a battle that happened with the British. That was the Battle of Nhlondwana, where the British were routed by the Zulus. Now, what he doesn't mention is that just within hours of that victory by the Zulus, they chased up a group of about 100 British who were situated at Rorke's Drift, and they had a far better position than the British had at Nhlondwana. And the Zulus sent in thousands of well-trained impi against this small detachment of British soldiers, and they were beaten back. They were completely decimated by the small group of British soldiers. There were 11 VCs handed out that day to these soldiers. And just to add to that situation, think of Blood River. We had less than 500 Boers fighting off an estimated 20,000 Zulus, once again well-trained. Now, look, when you look at history, it doesn't look good for untrained thugs coming into communities who are going to be very well planned, trained, they know their area, and, you know, look, there's no question that this is where the line in the sand is drawn. As I was speaking to General Isaac van Zyl just 2 nights ago. He heads up Buralishion. And he said, look, if these guys come into your suburb with pangas and start threatening you, this isn't a game. You shoot to kill. That was his comment. He said, you shoot to kill because you have got to protect your families. They're coming into your suburbs. They're coming there to loot and pillage, rape and kill. So you have to take very, very firm action. That was his statement. If that line is crossed where they start coming into suburbs. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, look, at the end of the day, I think the reality is that you have to defend yourself. You have to defend your property. You have to defend your family. And I mean, this goes, I think we need to be clear that this goes across racial lines, whether you white, black, Indian, colored, whatever the case is. Your family is attacked by unruly mobs, or your communities are being attacked, and your food supply is being taken away. You've got the full right, in terms of South African criminal law, to engage in what we would normally call private defense, to the extent that actions are in fact reasonable. This degree of reasonability would obviously depend on the context and the situation in which you are faced with. But in a general sense, I would certainly agree with the idea that we are now in a time and a life. I mean, I have with myself, I've never been too pro-gun or anti-gun. I've always called for a society of peace and so on. But the reality is now you need a situation where South Africans need to be armed. I mean, we all need to be armed with weapons. I've got daggers. I've got knuckle dusters. I've got pepper sprays. We've got pellet guns. I don't own a firearm. I've never been a fan. I can shoot, but I've never been too much of a fan of firearms. But the reality is that South Africans need to be armed. But more particularly, I think what the issue is that we need to create a discourse of understanding. You see, at some level, these mobs that are part and parcel of this entire debacle that we are engulfed in, these savage mobs that you see, not all of them know what's going on. You know, there are these the elitist, rich criminal elements that are controlling them. And I mean, amongst these mobs, you also see people that are just simply joining in, and just simply going. You know, the psychology of mass protests is that, you know, the way systems are orchestrated, the way things happen, it doesn't mean that each and every single person is now told or whispered in the ear, you need to do this, you need to do that. You just light a match onto one particular twig, and you'll see the entire bush catching up on fire. And that's what happens in this instance. You just need a few individuals that are controlling the strings, and then you can have the rest falling through. And I think some of the other factors that we need to also not forget is that this year in a row, which you in Australia, I don't believe you guys, or in New Zealand or other parts of the world are facing, we are facing another harsh lockdown.
Yeah.
For the second successive winter, we're under level 4. We were also under level 4, slightly different, but under different circumstances, but also level 4. And we've reached a stage where the deprivations have become unbearable for all of us. The ANC government has had an inhumane and cruel response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've discussed this at length on your programs in the past. And that kind of response is now fanning out across the country. And what you've had a situation is that come a year later, 500 billion rands has gone missing under the Ramaphosa government. The health minister, the minister of health, who was advising you on health and what steps to take to protect yourself against COVID, he's been implicated in corruption, and he's been involved in the theft of millions of rands which are paid to a media company, Digital Vibes, under his watch. He's stolen money, and now he's obviously on suspension. And even the 350 rands, the pathetic garbage of 350 rands, the COVID social relief grant that people were getting, that's been suspended. And so what you've got, you know, in a kind of a clear Oliver Twist, Charles Dickinson fashion, is that we have now lived under a cruel austerity regimen that is obviously leading to famine. And now you have a situation where Zuma, the hero of a selected few, is now imprisoned, and he's viewed as a liberator. People are incited to say, look, the same person, Ramaphosa, who's basically caused us poverty to you during the past year, has now put one of your heroes in jail. He's now destroying you, and you are now in a sense of unpredictability about the future. What happens? You then go berserk. People go rampant. So can you see what the trigger is on this specific issue? The results of this self-imposed structural adjustment packages that the ANC government is basically dishing out left, right, and center. That's indiscernible from the famine campaigns of the colonial era, where in the past under colonialism people were enslaved and so on. What you have is a situation is that people are enraged as a result, and I'm talking about all society being enraged. And in that enragement that you've created, due to this drill that was imposed on you under level 5 lockdown and level 4 lockdown and level 3, then back to level 4, then back to level 2 and so on. What this does is that it leads and is a kind of a spark, an additional spark over and above the incitement, over and above the orchestration, over and above what people are being told in the suburbs and the townships about what's going to happen. And knowing full well the police will do nothing, they then run rampant. And I believe, therefore, that none of this has got to do with poverty per se, but poverty does play a role insofar that it is used as a trigger by the orchestrators to say, look, now's your chance. Now come and do this. You see, poor people don't go and engage in looting. I mean, certainly there's desperation, it could happen, but for decades there's been poverty in this country. We've never seen this insanity as we've seen over the past 7 days. It only happened after the imprisonment of Zuma, which triggered the unrest and the turmoil and the chaos and the criminality that
Okay,
you've seen before
Yusuf,
our eyes.
I want to just question what you've just said. You said that triggered the unrest. I have a slightly different point of view. I think that this was basically, it might be suggested that it was a trigger for the planned unrest, but the actual, if it was the trigger, then you would have had a protest and it would have been peaceful. This was violent from the very get-go. So this, when you look at the coordination, was planned. It was something that was sitting there waiting to be unleashed. And this brings me to a point that I'd like you to address. Now, some people are suggesting that the new world order are behind this chaos going on in South Africa. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's certainly players that are involved. I don't know if you studied the Rand. We've seen bad situations in South Africa historically. Where, for example, there was this case about a couple of years back during the Zuma regime, and I like to call it regime, not a Zuma administration. Regime is basically what it was, where over 2 days he had that minister, that crazy minister Minister of Finance, I forget the guy's name, and
Tito
the Rand
Mboweni?
suddenly...
No, that was before him, wasn't it?
No, not Tito Mboweni. This was after Tito, where under the advice of the Guptas, he had this guy, I forget his name, but whatever the case is, immediately the Rand dropped.
Yes.
I was surprised that at this particular point in time, Rand is 14 Rand 71 to the dollar. Now, that's remarkable. That's remarkable that despite the fact that there's 10 billion rands that has been lost, 10 billion rands now, as we stand, 10 billion rands of infrastructure, people are suggesting, just in KZN alone, has been lost, and in many instances will be possibly impossible to recover. The Rand somehow or the other surprisingly sits at about 14 Rand, or, just check up what the latest cross-currency checks are. Now, this raises, and in my opinion, triggers alarm bells to the extent that despite all the, if you call this anarchy, although anarchy is somewhat more organized, despite all this criminality and chaos and destruction of businesses and cleaning up of entire warehouses, why has the Rand not dropped? I'm not so sure if you can tell me otherwise, Scott, but it seems to me that if that is indeed the case, that the Rand has not dropped by those, and certainly these markets can in fact be manipulated, that basically shows us that at some level, this chaos and criminality that you are seeing is somehow or the other not going against the grain, and is somehow or the other being viewed as convenient and viable for far more bigger players on the scene. Because I would have thought initially that compared to the pound, particularly compared to the dollar, we would have been sitting with about 17 Rand to the dollar, or at the very least, I wouldn't be surprised, as bad as it is, 18 Rand to the dollar. But as I see it now, there's been very little change between the currency exchange between the Rand and the dollar, which possibly raises the issue that there are players out there that would be viewing this as a necessity, should there possibly be a particular cartel out there that wants to take advantage of this particular kind of looting that is going on. Because sometimes, in order to take over the economy of a nation, to take over the economy of a country, what happens? You destroy the existing businesses, you destroy the existing economy. That's what happened, historically speaking, in all parts of Africa. The existing economy of the country itself is totally destroyed. And you've got foreign nationals coming over and taking over. I don't know. Maybe we need to check into this. But how many Chinese businesses were affected? How many? The China Mall, as I understand, is still operating in the Durban area. Macro, which is nearby, was totally gutted. Game City, which is probably one of the oldest chain stores in South Africa, together with some of these other businesses, totally destroyed, totally gutted. So this raises a number of questions in terms of what is really going on at the grassroots No, I don't
No.
know. I'm just trying to check up now,
Yeah. Now, Yusuf,
about what is essentially happening. Yeah.
Yusuf, I just want to add to that,
Go ahead.
and that is that there have been some suggestions that Ramaphosa is basically controlled by the New World Order, and I don't dispute that fact. But when you consider the fact that Jacob Zuma, while he was president, was singing the praises of the World Economic Forum. In fact, he was on every World Economic Forum Africa platform talking with Klaus Schwab by his side. Now, the suggestions is that he is anti the New World Order. I think all these politicians have been bought. And when you look at Duduzile Zuma, who now is kind of positioning himself as the new post-revolution leader in South Africa by his utterances in his recent videos, you know, you've got this situation where it's the same old show. It doesn't matter who's there; they're still being controlled by somebody. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, yeah. You see, Scott, and I've maintained this point, is that what we are seeing right now, and I'm saying, you know, the looting, the criminality, all of that is chaos. But the fact that it is happening systematically, it's too organized to be happening all at the same time, to be declared as being totally sporadic. And it's possible right now that you know, the powers be, and I'm just simply speculating wildly, I may add, that the powers may possibly want to destroy this existing government, or to show this government for the incompetent level of leadership that which indeed it is, and install whom they want. They have already shown, what we've already seen is that the government is incompetent. The looting will bring hunger, systems failure, petrol, food, electricity. You know, electricity in areas where I am, there's no electricity for several days. Water shortages, which will leave the population even more easier to manipulate. And I would say here that in this case, it's either the capitalists would then become as saviors. They would be bearing the gifts and buy loyalty by providing to the hungry masses who have been totally destroyed and gutted as a result of what is happening. And these individuals, the powers that be, the shadow leadership, then have the infrastructure to do so and the capital. And I wouldn't be surprised if they would use the people, which they have been using at this particular time, to loot the stores, whilst they in fact loot the country, and your own people that you are wanting to lead are used for their own destruction. I mean, you know, think about this. If you are dissatisfied with your neighbor, would you go and burn your house down? You wouldn't. And that's exactly what is happening here.
Yeah.
If people are dissatisfied with the Ramaphosa administration, I mean, not just in Durban City Centre, in Alexandra Township, they're burning black businesses. I mean, they're burning black businesses, they're burning colored businesses in Soweto, for example. And you look at Africa itself, I mean, in Libya, if you look at places where infrastructure and supply chains are destroyed, we celebrate sometimes thinking that we've won the smaller game and there's regime change. But they've actually won the bigger game, because South Africa has been arrogant for a number of years. Just the fact that we've had our own problems. Now you've got an opportunity by the powers that be, whoever's running the show, and you're talking about a new world order, of reducing South Africa once and for all. Now, there's always been inequality between rich and poor, and there's a gap between the super rich and the super poor, and that's always been there. But now you have an opportunity where once and for all, whoever's controlling the show, orchestrating it, can eventually reduce the entire country, or at the very least 2 major provinces, which are economic hubs, to total beggary, where we'll be unable to produce our own food, we'll be unable to get petrol, we'll be unable to move goods, and this without a single shot being fired or any kind of military takeover. And so the question is this: when you're talking about the New World Order, is it possible that we are being set up for our own destruction, and in the process give away our country and give our minerals away to possible potential saviors who will say, look, your government has now failed you. Your country is reduced to total starvation and beggary. You've got no food, you've got no water, you've got no petrol, you've got no electricity. We are here to save you. So it's possible that there is a bigger game being played, and that what we are looking at, seeing as simply the pawns and the Trojan horse, whilst society is being manipulated and led. And so Zuma and Ramaphosa may be just simply puppets or pawns in a far bigger game that is being played out there. And South Africa may be viewed as a test subject for other countries to come. I mean, this is what they did in the 70s and the 80s. You check economic history, structural adjustment programs, how they destroyed nations and countries like East Timor and Indonesia and Cambodia and all these countries. And South Africa has for decades, despite the fact that we had our problems, and we still do, but South Africa has arrogantly presented itself, wrongfully so I might add, as the leader of Africa. South Africa has always done that. It's always presented itself to the world. I mean, we were on the UN Council as well, on the World Economic Forum. We always are playing our role. We've always arrogantly presented ourselves as leader. And any country that needs to be put forth as a test subject for showing
Yusuf,
to reduce
Yusuf,
the country of this arrogance to a degree of beggary, where people are not dependent. Yes.
We've hit a bad patch. We've hit a bad patch with your internet. I'll just address a couple of things. We'll come back to you. Now, I just want to read a comment that MCK Fox has written in the side chat, and I just happened to see this. He said, received a message from black gentlemen. Black communities have received message for gathering Friday midnight at Strand to start their destruction there and to continue onto the Somerset Mall. Now, if that clearly social media is being used by these people there must be a WhatsApp group, or they must have some kind of localized WhatsApp where they're coordinating their riots and their burning and their looting. I mean, there's no question about that, and nothing has been done about that. And just with that point that you raised just now, which you touched on, was the unemployment aspect. I mean, South Africa already has an unemployment of over 50% at least. We've got an issue with SASSA. They haven't got money to make those social payments. Now, you're going to have millions more people being put onto the unemployment heap as a result of what's going on right now. How the heck are they going to fix that?
You know, I'm just looking at a book here. I think I may have discussed it with you before, by Naomi Klein, called The Shock Doctrine. This was written, I think, in about 2007. And this was very early in the so-called democracy. You're looking at about probably 10 years, 15 years after democracy. At that stage, we are given figures that between 1991 to 2002, the unemployment rate for South Africans more than doubled from 23% to 48%. This was back then. Now you said more than 50%. I would say it's even higher than that. What we've got basically are figures closer to, at the very least, 70%, 60% at the very least, if I'm being prudent. But with what you see right now, most of these businesses that have been destroyed, you've got the vast majority, the majority of the population of South Africa, a significant number of black people that are being employed at these businesses.
Yes.
There's going to be a significant amount of job losses. It's going to be inordinately huge. Although, as if we don't already have an economic problem. And what about the insurance? I mean, who's going to foot the bill in most of these instances? You have a situation where I think unless you've got certain clauses which cover for aspects, most of the insurance companies, for example, don't cover you for acts of, what they call vis major or vis major acts of God or rioting and so on. who's going to foot the bill? If you destroy a multi-million rand business, it's gone. It doesn't come back. If you have that shell that is there and you just steal the items, you can always restock shelf. When you take the goods out and you destroy it, it's gone. It's good.
I
There's
tell
an
you what the
impossibility
problem
that you
there.
can come back.
I tell you what the problem there, Yusuf, is. You've not only destroyed game, but you've also destroyed all the lines of supply to the game warehouse, so that they can't stock items again because it's all broken. And that means that even if you've got the ability to build your business again, you don't have the stock because it's been burnt, it's been destroyed, it's no longer available in South Africa. If I was a supplier in China, I'd be saying, no way am I going to send my stuff to South Africa. They'll just burn it. And this is going to impact every aspect of business in South Africa, right from the warehouse going all the way to the stuff you see on your shelf. The whole chain is going to be totally decimated by this, and that involves unemployment, and the outcome is starvation.
I don't know honestly how we're gonna. I think about a lot of these stores. We are burning. We used to shop at them. How many years it's going to take to recover? Because if you had stolen the items, you can always restock. But when you steal the items and burn down the entire store and burn down this entire warehouse or warehouses and buildings,
Idiocy.
How do you come back again?
Idiocy, lunacy. It's just ridiculous.
It's total ridiculous. And so that's what people are now saying.
Yusuf, I must say, what really makes me hurtful is while they're burning, you hear these, all these sort of chanting and, isn't this exciting? I don't get it. What sort of mentality is that?
Yeah, I think what's now happened. What is now also quite dangerous, besides that, is that there are now suggestions. Sihle Zikalala, for example, the premier, had the audacity just a few days ago to suggest that, and this was before he made any comments on the rioting. He says he made the comment that it may be better for the release of Jacob Zuma, and I'll tell you what. That is a high possibility, because there is a chance and there is a probability. There's a rescission application before the Constitutional Court at this particular juncture, which we can probably go into if you want to. And there is a judgment that's been reserved, and we're waiting for the outcome. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Constitutional Court capitulates to what is happening at this particular juncture, and then makes it a total about is happening. And in my eyes, they will just simply totally lose credibility, because it's never happened. It's totally unheard of. I mean, where you've gone and rescind a decision by the Constitutional Court. But that may just happen. You may have another judge. I think it was Jafta sent me this, and I think I need to probably share this with you. He, in fact, sent me a message yesterday narrating some of the views of Jafta. And what he basically says, what the Constitutional Court, Chris Jafta states, he says he's lambasting his own sister, Sisi Kampepe. That's the co-judge, Sisi Kampepe. He says, this is what this Constitutional Judge says, that she acted inappropriately and unlawfully. Imagine that. The judge from the Constitutional Court berating his own colleague, the fellow judge, Sisi Kampepe, who made the order declaring Zuma in contempt and sentencing him. He says she acted inappropriately and unlawfully by sentencing President Zuma to prison, as his case was a civil contempt which does not lead to a conviction but civil remedies. Convictions are solely for criminal contempt. Rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
Now,
because
Yusuf,
if you,
okay, let's talk about this contempt of court with Zuma. Is there any question that he was in contempt of court?
Absolutely no question whatsoever. You see, this is let me just explain this particular situation, which is why I tell you that this particular judge is totally wrong on this specific issue. In a civil trial or in a criminal trial, if you are declared in contempt, you can be declared in contempt, and the fact that you are declared in contempt by either a civil court or a criminal court, the consequential ramifications of that declaration of contempt by a court, either in a civil court or a criminal court, is the same. In both instances, you can be sentenced to a term of imprisonment. That can happen. If a judge is lenient, he'll say, well, look, maybe not a term of imprisonment, probably a suspended sentence, at the least the option of a fine. But what this judge is saying is that basically the fact that Zuma was in contempt in a civil trial does not lead to a conviction, but civil remedies. Now, the point being made is this, is that historically, in our country, always, it's not been an irregular procedure that somebody could be jailed or incarcerated due to contempt in a civil particular action. Let me give you the background behind this. In January this year, what had happened last year, there was the Zondo Commission where Zuma was supposed to attend, and then he attended for a short time, and then he refused to attend. What happened is that the Secretary for the Judicial Commission of Inquiry at the Zondo Commission, in terms of Act, which in fact gives a Commission of Inquiry the power to compel a witness to appear before it, they proceeded with urgent application and they sought direct access to the Constitutional Court. Now, normally this could have been done in the High Court, but the reason why they approached the Constitutional Court was that it would cause delay by virtue of the fact that should Zuma not be by the High Court, he would take it to the Supreme Court and the Constitutional Court, and they anticipated to go down that specific route. So they beat him by approaching the Constitutional Court directly. So they applied directly, and they got an order for direct access to the Constitutional Court. And in terms of that direct access to the Constitutional Court, they sought an order against which was that he was to obey all summons, all directives that are issued by the Zondo Commission, and that he does not have a right to silent in the proceedings before the Commission, and he has to appear. That was a court order. He failed. He failed to appear before the court order. And initially, when they walked out, the argument was that Zondo was biased. Eventually, having not appeared, they then approached the Constitutional Court again and sought an order and to declare that Zuma's conduct was contemptuous. And they were successful in that, which they did, and they obtained. And they found that he was in contempt. And over and above that, the Constitutional Court passed a ruling that he was sentenced to a period of 3 years, which would mean that he would sit 3 months. By the way, Zuma, had he filled his sentence, he would have sat for just 3 months, not 15 months, not 3 years, but just simply 3 months. And then he brought an application for research. Now, here's the problem. The dilemma is this, is that from a technical point of view, the Constitutional Court in this country is not a court of fact. It's not meant to make decisions on facts. It only makes decisions on constitutional issues. So ideally, the Zondo Commission should not have theoretically approached the Constitutional Court directly. They should have approached the High Court and then taken it to the Constitutional Court should the need have arisen, had Zuma taken it on appeal. They bungled up, in my opinion, by approaching the Constitutional Court directly and getting an order on fact which declared Zuma as being contemptuous and then having sentenced him to a period of, 3 years. That's not the duty of the Constitutional Court. A High Court could have achieved that. But that's where the dilemma, in fact, arises from a technical point of view. But having said all of that, still, the conduct of Zuma was totally contemptuous. Now, the problem is, as a result of that order that was obtained, declaring him contemptuous, and sentencing to a period of 3 years. He now has to face a term of imprisonment. But he has brought an application for rescission, doing away with this constitutional court order, and we are basically in a position where we are waiting a decision. What was disturbing for me was the legal suggestion made by Judge Chris Jafta, where he suggested quite ludicrously that nobody can be sentenced to a term of imprisonment for civil contempt. He was wrong. You certainly can in terms of South African law. If you are in contempt in a civil court or in a criminal court, you are found guilty of contempt and you can be given a term of imprisonment. That has always been the case, so there's nothing untoward about that. If, in my opinion, the only issue that was possibly problematic was the procedure that was followed by the Zondo Commission in approaching the Constitutional Court directly. And of course, not having a fully fledged criminal trial, contempt trial, where Zuma is then tried for contempt, evidence is led, and then of course a determination is made. But they gave him an opportunity in any event to come and oppose that application. He didn't. He didn't oppose the application at all. And so not surprisingly, they passed an order against him. So I hope I haven't lost anyone on that particular issue. But the reality is that in terms of law, Zuma is in contempt. There's no debate on that specific issue. Whether the procedure followed by the Zondo Commission was correct or not, that's another debate entirely.
Okay.
But for all intents and purposes, any court would have found him in contempt.
Yeah. Now, Yusuf, I just want to summarize what we've been talking around tonight. Basically, we've been saying that the situation South Africa finds itself in at this very moment in time is claimed to be as a result of Zuma being incarcerated. Now, there are big questions about whether there's something far bigger going on and whether this is not being orchestrated by high-up people within the ANC who are Zuma supporters. And where we're at right now with this is we're basically on the crossroads of the country just breaking down into complete anarchy or somehow a semblance of order being brought back. Now, I want to put this question to you. I see three basic options that will happen in the event that things keep getting worse. The one is that the United Nations might be called in to fix the problem. The other is that there might be a coup by people like Julius Malema, who might just claim that he is now running the country. And the third, which I think is the best solution, is that the adults in the room will retake the classroom. And I'm talking about the minority groups who collectively will say, we've had enough of this bullshit under the ANC. We're now going to take back the governance of the country under martial law. Now, from your perspective, which option do you think is most likely going forward?
You know, with a country like South Africa, it's so difficult to say what the future in fact holds for us. The president, I was seeing a report by the journalist today that the president at this particular juncture, he's in a sense forced, in a manner of speaking, to run the country through this kind of technocracy where his official cabinet members, they are nothing like what someone described as decorative dashboard ornaments. When they speak, they're embarrassing disasters. The security cluster, is in such a total chaos that even Ramaphosa himself may have to take control of the SANDF because it's in such a poor state. Destiny of all technologies and issues. So, in my opinion, in order to maintain some degree of stability, which is, difficult to say how South Africa operates. We are such a dislocated, schizophrenic nation. Ramaphosa is still a man of metal. Would have to face up to the fact that at some point in time, the state will need to re-establish the monopoly of violence. And that's a dangerous thing that I'm stating, because that would basically mean it would require the ability to murder people on the streets and the industrial scale. Now he's got the precedent of having done that. He did that in Maracana already. He's done that before. But at this juncture, in my opinion, neither him nor his perverted backers have the stomach for this. The alternative, which may obviously be more unpalatable to the government and the backers of this kind of slaughter, the impending carnage that is taking place, is that you have to basically create a new social contract where everybody gets a fair deal. And so, in my opinion, the future, Scott, the future in fact belongs to those people who understand that basic subsistence and the right to decent decent living is in fact a human right, a right that can and has to and should be guaranteed by the state. And at this particular juncture, this current government continue in the fashion that it has been continuing, and the so-called technocracy that you see, should it continue to fail dismally in fact understanding that this present moment, what we see at this particular juncture is looting, destruction, is mayhem, that this in fact, should they fail to see that this in fact represents a significant degree of an opportunity to change track, to change the way that they've been operating for the past decade or 2 or 3 decades, then in the end of the day, the gangsters will be winning the day. So at this particular juncture, what we realize, Scott, is that for 3 decades now, we're almost 30 years, 27 years since 1994, the post-apartheid elite have been engaged in a massive looting spree. We have no doubts about that. Now we realize that others are now engaging in looting, as we can see. The ordinary public, these mobs that are being orchestrated one way or the other, they now join the fray of engaged into looting at the expense of the vast majority of South African society, even though these people are in a minority. And it's as bad as it looks on TV. So the reality is that this should provide an ideal opportunity to say the Ramaphosa state, I've been exhausted during the time of my administration. I've been a puppet during the time of the Zuma regime. When Zuma was involved in his decade-long era of corruption and sanguinary warfare and war against the poor, I was a deputy president. I did nothing. I sat back. I said nothing. I was a quiet puppet. And then just simply came on the scene in 2017 through the CR17 campaign, which was highly questionable. And now we are faced with the mess that we are in. This, in fact, gives an opportunity. When we're talking about reset, Scott, true reset is that the government would look back at itself and say it's failed dismally. It's realized that what it's seeing now on the streets is a factionalism that it has caused. It's playing its own factional battles on the streets of South Africa. And it now needs to come to the realization that this has to stop. It's evil that it's perpetrated on the masses of South Africans has to come to an end now, once and for all. It has to take control, or at the very least, it then does not need to exist. It has to be then eliminated entirely. If it does not realize that, then this government would have to be removed entirely. And that would mean that law-abiding and civil society has to get involved. We need to take over the discourse. If we have the power to communicate and articulate our concerns in such a fashion on programs like yours, what stops the rest of the more balanced, moderate South Africans from retaking South African society? South African society right now, as we see, has been hijacked. It's been hijacked by these gangsters. There are 2 gangsters. There's a gangster state, and there's a gangster shadow state within the body of ANC factionalism that is playing out on the streets of South Africa. And at a far broader level, it's been controlled by this hidden government, this technocracy that's in control of all these parties and all these players operating from within the shadows to totally destroy South African society and reduce it to beggary. If we have been, and what has been inspiring over these past few days is that I've seen people from our own communities standing up and defending our own properties, our own infrastructure. I've seen it on the South Coast. Now our communities are saying, you police are hopeless, get lost. No police are around. The communities are standing up and protecting ourselves. If we can protect our properties, our households, our businesses, there is nothing stopping us from retaking South African society from the hijackers that are totally out to destroy us. That's my particular message to you, Scott. Over to you.
Okay. Well, look, I see a totally different outcome if things get worse. I see two big things happening in South Africa. And for all those people who support secession in the Western Cape, they're going to love what I'm going to say, because what these leaders of the secessionist movements have been saying is that when things completely come unstuck in South Africa, they then have grounds to actually set up a separate state. And I would suggest that if things become totally chaotic in South Africa, the ANC government disband, there's no government, I would suggest that the Western Cape will secede. It'll become a separate state. And I would suggest that KwaZulu-Natal, under the King of the Zulus, would secede and become a separate state. That's two no-brainers as far as I'm concerned. And then looking further down the track, I think what could happen is areas like the Northern Cape, where Orania is, would become part of a greater seceded area around the Western Cape. And I think this is the silver lining behind the chaos that is going on right now, because that would mean that the gangsterism that has just embroiled South Africa for the last 30 years will be broken. And areas like the Western Cape can start rebuilding their community, and the Zulus can go back to their tribalism and their factionalism and do what they like to do. So you're going to have two extremes happening. You're going to have a society that has the opportunity in the Western Cape to move back to a semblance of civility, whereas I think other parts of South Africa are going to become absolutely ungovernable. That's what I see happening. What are your thoughts on that, Yusuf?
I wouldn't want South Africa to be broken up. In fact, I've always maintained the fact that we shouldn't be broken up into the succession of Cape Town, Western Cape, and I've always maintained that even countries like Lesotho and Swaziland, the total dictatorship. Swaziland is much smaller. The problems are not on the scale of South Africa, but there's no political stability there. There's political distance. I've been tortured by King Maswati, who is raping little girls and so on. I've always maintained that those countries should have always been annexed by South Africa. They had no need to exist as separate independent banana republics within the midst of South Africa. So I'm not in favor of a succession or succeeding of Western Cape and Oran and KZN. I believe that South Africans, have a distinct identity of unification. I want to believe that a lot of South Africans, and the majority of South Africans, are at the heart level good people. What we've realized, and I don't want to say this but there's a kind of a lump in my throat when I say this, that it would be tragic the day that South Africa moves its separate ways and is partitioned into these different provinces, which then acquire their own kind of independence. I would like a fully viable, workable, meaningful, pluralistic, multicultural, but fully viable, economically sustainable South African nation where everybody has the ability to work, earn a decent income, have access to all the items of infrastructure, goods, vegetation, agriculture, where we control the means of production, and of course where people can be, where we establish some degree of egalitarianism in the sense of people being able to live as decent human beings. The reality of the situation, Scott, unfortunately, the darker side of it is that we have a president, Ramaphosa, that has been shown up now as possibly the weakest of all ANC leaders in the party's modern history. We've never seen a more weaker leader than Cyril Ramaphosa. During his tenure, um, we've discovered that he's not in charge of the machinery of the state. He's impervious to any kind of genuine threats from the factionalists in this party. And at this point, should a national general conference go ahead within the ANC, then it's possible that this big ANC meetup would have long and sustainable consequences for his own presidency. Because what would happen is this current chaos that we see will be held up as proof of his incompetence, proof, as I've always claimed, that he's a Teflon president, he's a paper president, and it will cost a fortune in both cash and indeed political capital for him to regain his particular pros as president in the near future. He's become a laughing stock. He's become a total laughing stock. His government has been shown out to be a laughing stock by people and bandits and gangsters that have shown that, as for all your bravado and your big talk about ensuring that people need to wear masks and not walk out in the streets and maintain social distancing, forget about social distancing, forget about masks, forget about maintaining your vaccination program. Your police could not do anything when people walked away with goods and destroyed entire infrastructures and businesses in the country. You could do nothing, nothing at all. That's what the reality is.
Right. Okay. Well, look,
Yes,
I'm going to wrap up this live stream in a few minutes. It's been fantastic chatting to you, Yusuf. But look, there are a couple of questions that I've seen in the side chat that I want to put to you. Antoinette Leroux has asked,
Sure.
will insurance companies actually pay out damages to all these companies? Is there not a clause applied by them that they won't accept responsibility in case of damage due to rioting?
I don't know, depending on the insurance company itself. But as I understand, rioting and looting may be viewed as what they would call in Latin, and I'm not a specialist in insurance law, vis maior, or an act of God, or something which is kind of out of the extraordinary. And I think in situations of that particular nature, where there is a degree of rarity, like 1,000,000 to 1. I mean, you could probably say 1,000,000 to 1 that such an incident ever would have happened. Who would? I mean, we predicted it, but we never knew on this particular scale. In those instances, a lot of these insurance companies will possibly not pay out. They will not pay out in these instances, and unfortunately, that would mean loss of billions of rands, billions of rands. Economic Brahmins that have been controlled or controlling the capital in this country will certainly ensure at the end of the day that those people who lose out at the end of the day would be obviously the taxpayers. The taxpayers will lose out at the end of the day, not the insurance companies. I don't think the insurance companies, in fact, have the capital to, in fact, cover the losses that we are seeing. I don't think the insurance companies even have the capital. I mean, if you're talking about billions and billions of rands, which insurance company, for the life of me, would have the ability to cover that? This is unheard of. It's not just 100,000 rands or 200,000 rands. I mean, you're looking at billions, millions and billions. You're talking about millions and billions.
Yeah.
Which insurance company is going to cover that?
The loss of income on top of that.
The damage is likely 10%. The loss of income. It will be nearly impossible to rebuild what has been burned.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure that this is going to be ever covered. That's the loss that we have sustained. That people have. It hasn't hit home. It's going to hit home in the days and the weeks and the months to come. What has happened in the 7 days, if it doesn't already stop? Let's hope and pray. We can only do that. Hope and pray that this stops and this comes to some sort of end, and that there's a silver lining at the end of a dark cloud.
Well, South Africa is starting to look rather like Beirut did. I mean, it's becoming tragic. Now, Fiona Timms has said, has the DA spoken out about this at all? I think you mentioned that they have actually taken up the Zuma family regarding their tweets and stuff like that. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, look, I think they've taken off the Zuma family regarding the tweets, but I mean, with DA, it's sometimes a lot of talk and very little
No
action.
action. Yeah.
I haven't seen, at least I've missed it, but I haven't seen a powerful statement coming out from any leading official opposition party member or leader about the chaos that has happened. Nothing. I haven't seen anything coming out. I can't even remember. Maybe I have missed it, but I haven't seen John Steenhuisen, who's rather very pompous and talkative and arrogant in his own right, coming up publicly and making a particular comment. Nothing. I've seen nothing from any of the major politicians. They've been silent. And this raises the aspect about the conspiratorial nature of what has transpired over the past couple of hours. It raises questions. Why have the politicians been so silent about what's happening? It's like there's a deathly silence, similar to your police not doing anything. Not seeing any police car or police movement or police vehicle. What's going on? Where have they all gone to? It really raises number of alarm bells.
Yeah, well, there's one politician who has been quite outspoken, and I'll give the devil his due. It's Neil de Beer from UIM. He's been saying, look, we need a peace charter. We need to get all the different parties together. And I'd say, well done, Neil. At least someone is talking about solutions. Congratulations. Now, I just want to wrap up this live stream with just a comment, Yusuf, and that is that Barbara Sattler just said in the side chat here, a leopard never changes its spots. Now, we're talking about Africa. Democracy has failed in Africa, whichever country you look at. It doesn't matter. You can't find a country in Africa where it hasn't created the chaos that we've had in places like Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, Tanzania, Kenya. I mean, the whole of Africa, Rwanda, Burundi, once you've got democracy, it doesn't work in Africa. Democracy doesn't work when you've got this larger group of people who take power and then just cause what happened in South Africa over the last 27 years. So the restructuring of South Africa post this chaos, you've got to try and find another way forward, because if you have another so-called democracy, you're going to go down the same track. This is why I was suggesting the idea of having a Western Cape where you'd have a larger population of minority groups who would be able to form a stable government, which would be outside of the African way, the tribalism and stuff like that. And that I think is the only way forward. I'm going to let you have the last word on this, Yusuf, and then I'm going to wrap up. Please, go back to you.
Yeah, look, that's a debate on its own as to why the democratic system of governance hasn't worked in Africa or failed dismally. And there's so many. It's such a nuanced question because there's so many factors surrounding that. Maybe what we've inherited in the South African context, even now in Parliament, the Westminster concept that we are a product of, and possibly that doesn't work in Africa. Possibly you need some other system of governance. Possibly you need to develop some other tools of how people begin to govern themselves. Possibly you need some degree of an organized form of I don't know whether libertarianism would possibly work. That hasn't been tried out, or syndical anarchism as a kind of a more sophisticated form of that. There needs to be possibly tried and tested methods out there that could possibly be more applicable in terms of how Africa and African communities and societies begin to govern themselves. I mean, there was a time in history, and we're talking about prehistory, where Africa, and I'm talking about ancient history. I mean, the Egyptians developed the pyramids. You had, for example, sophisticated infrastructure that was developed in Africa BC before the rise of Rome and Greece and so on, where there was some degree of leadership and monarchy and guidance and some degree of infrastructure that was there at some point in ancient history. But we need to develop our own tools of communication. Perhaps we need to move away from this kind of dependency of wanting to imitate. Possibly this is a problem, that we want to imitate Western Europe or the United States in terms of how governments are basically run. And then when you superimpose that system of governance within the African context, it's just a recipe for disaster, and it's destined to fail. Because why has it failed for the past, for not just for South Africa, but every country in Africa? And that's an easy question that can basically answer. What I can say in the end is that there are principles. There are certain principles that you can imbibe. Even within the African diaspora, the concept of Ubuntu, where people are people through other people, where there is some degree of humanity and humanitarianism and human rights, and recognizing that people have the right to basic needs and essentials and respect of each other and common human decency. All that has to be reframed in a broader context and reintroduced in our context, South African society, because that has somehow been lost. We're now a nation clearly can be described as a nation of savagery. I mean, savagery, inhumanity, insanity, imbecility. If you can call it a land of beasts, where every man is his own king and his own leader, and he does what he wants to. So I think we need to establish that degree of humanity again within us, and all we can do is create that level of discourse. I don't have major solutions. I'm just a lawyer and possibly somewhat at a lower level an analyst in terms of what is going on. But I think communities need to come together. If communities can stand up for themselves and defend themselves, and as we can see, for each other. I saw one thing which Marlena sent me, and I'm going to leave it at this. I saw on West Street in Durban was a mess. It was a chaos. It was a disaster. There were poor people today, people that lived there, blacks, whites, Indians. They were cleaning the mess of West Street. That for me is a sign to show that, look, there is at least some degree of decency, some element of humanity deep down in the level and our hearts of South African people. We do have something. We can tap into that. We can bring that out. We can take back our society that has been wrenched from us by these thugs and gangsters and criminals. And we can create a better society for ourselves in the future. But it is a perpetual struggle. It's an ongoing struggle. It's not going to be an easy struggle.
Right.
So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I'll just, a thought came into my head while you were talking, and that is Singapore, the Singapore model. Just 30 years ago, 40 years ago, Singapore was not unlike where South Africa is right now. And what they did was they brought in one very simple rule to govern the country. And that was a thing called meritocracy. In other words, the best person for the job. Nothing to do with paternalism or friends, or, it was the best person for that job. And that's why Singapore has become the powerhouse it is today. And of course, the other big thing that Singapore has is if a government official is corrupt, they get hammered. They are straight behind the bars for years and years and years. And I'll just leave everybody with that thought. Some sort of government with meritocracy, where BEE is thrown out of the window, I think could go a long way in solving the problem. All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Yusuf. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. Your insights are really valued. And I want to thank we nearly had 1,000 people watching at one stage. We're down to about 700 at the moment across the two channels. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Please remember, guys, to register on lovinglifetv.com. That's where we are transitioning to, because we've had enough of Censorship City at YouTube. But please do also register or subscribe to the YouTube channel Loving Life, because we're only about 1,500 subscribers short of that magical 100,000 mark. And so I would love to see that achieved in the next month or two. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. Once again, thank you, Yusuf. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, and have a great evening.
Thank you very much, and you go well, and God bless the people of South Africa.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to thank our moderators for looking after the side chat. And again, everybody watching, thank you for joining us tonight. We have live streams most nights at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time on a whole range of subjects. So if you want to go and have a look at the playlist on YouTube, you will see you will see all the live streams that we've had in the past month, and we've covered a whole range of subjects from, you'll have to go to lovinglivetv.com to see some of the more controversial subjects that YouTube would have just flattened in a flash with their fat fingers. All right, take care. I'll leave the side chat open for a few minutes so you can say your goodbyes, and have a great evening. Bye for now.